So while I haven't been attached or a part of the ministry for all of its 61 years, one thing is apparent to me. God's favor and his touch and his blessing has always been on this ministry, and I think that's a wonderful thing. Give it up for God. And so we are venturing into the natural and organic call that an organization or an individual who has been blessed and who has favor, we're venturing, and we continue to venture into the territory in which folks or institutions who have this sort of covering over it are called to do. They're called to go forth and do what they have been purposed to do. And so we hear the words resonating of our founder when she says, "Grow we must." And we have been talking about how challenging it is to grow without changing. Yeah? You talk to me. Let me hear you. Let me make me know you're here. I just want to be sure I'm talking to the right people. And so as we allow the words and the gravity of the words, "grow we must," to not only settle in our soul, but to move us, right? To move us to action. And I'm convinced that ministry is intended to be the opposite of sport. In sport, there are typically 12 people on the court, or 24 people on the court, or 50, 20-something people on the field, but there are usually more people in the field of play than there are more people in the stadium than there are on the field of play. Ministry is intended to be the other way. It's intended to be a room full of people involved in the work and just a handful of people who sit on the sidelines. And so ministry is not intended to be a spectator sport. There is always something for all of us to do. If this is your 61st year here or your first time here, there is something for you to do to advance the idea that God is good. To share with the people close to you that transformation is possible. There is something for all of us to do. And so what can we do right where we are? What can we do as individuals? What can we do to facilitate the move of where we are purposed to go? What can we do? So the first thing I want to encourage all of us to do, raise your hands if you are all of us. Let me see you. Yes, 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 all of us. I don't see some hands up. Doc, I don't see your hand up. You're all of us. Right? All of us. Let me see your hands if you are all of us. Yes, yes. That's you. So if your hand is up, I am talking to you. One of the first things that you can do as we continue to let God grow us is stop and pray. That's one of the first things I'm asking you to do as you engage with this ministry. I'm asking you to stop and pray. Pray for what? Pray that the will of God be done in and through God's idea called Christ Universal Temple. I'm asking you to actively add this ministry and the work of this ministry into your prayer life. If you don't have a prayer life, I want to encourage you to start a prayer life right here and right now. You don't even have to wait until you get home. Right within the recesses of your soul, you can right now just take a moment to turn within and just say, "God, I thank you for Christ Universal Temple." Right where you are, you can just take a moment to turn within and say, "Father, not our will, but your will be done for Christ Universal Temple." And I want to encourage you to do that in your own life. But since we are at this moment talking about the life of the ministry, but the life of the ministry only exists out of the life of the people. And so there is no ministry without the people. And so the first thing I want to ask you to do is just stop and pray. Remember that prayer is communion between you and God. Remember that prayer is an accelerated way of thinking. And so if in these corridors, or if on the phone lines, or if in your seemingly private conversations, you're talking with somebody about this church and the talk turns negative, I want to encourage you to just stop and pray. Stop and pray that the communication can be transformed. I want to encourage you to just stop and pray because you remember that your words have power. Yeah? What can we do? We can begin to pray about the activity of this ministry and allow ourselves to get on God's program and to stay on God's program and to be about God's program. Not long ago, actually it was some time ago, but Reverend Coleman, shortly after we moved into this location, she began teaching the leaders within the church this program of building the excellent church. Any of you remember that, building the excellent church? And I am convinced that while she was teaching that program to us when we were at the height of the ministry, hear me, we were at the height of the ministry, I believe that she was trying to get us to take another step up. Because how many of you know that you are either moving, maintaining, or decreasing? And I think she saw us at the peak, and usually when you are at the peak, you don't maintain peak performance unless you go up or you go down. And so I think she was trying to get us to take another step up, but that's not always easy to do. And so now we find ourselves presented with an opportunity, that same opportunity, to rebuild the excellent church. Is that all right? What can you do from right where you are? You can become a voice of vision and hope for this ministry. You, right where you are. First time here, 61st year here, you can become a vision of hope and a voice of vision and hope for this ministry, because there are some attitudes of mind that we have to be on the lookout for. There are some attitudes of mind that will present themselves that we will have to confront as we grow into the future. There will be some attitudes of mind, like the attitude of mind, the denier attitude of mind that says everything is fine just as it is. That's a mindset that can be in the midst of us. There is something to be said for being blind to the environment that's around you. And so I want to encourage you to not be a denier about what presents itself to us. I'm a guy, I'm a man, and so sometimes I do man things. This one time Sylvia and I were in Cancun, and I like to see the city or the country that I'm in rather than just staring at the walls of the hotel room. And on this particular day, we rented a car. And I was convinced that based upon where we were and where I wanted to go, I could hop in the car and just follow what I thought to be the path and just drive around and then easily drive back. But as we were going, I started to make a couple wrong turns. And I kept saying to myself, self, you know where you're going. And Sylvia kept saying to me, do we need help? And because I am a guy and because I am a man and I sometimes do man things, I said with great confidence, I don't need any help. I know exactly where it is I'm going. And I made a couple more turns that I thought to be the right turn, and before I knew it, I was in a part of Cancun that you never see on the brochure. And it was getting dark. And while I know that God is omnipresent, I started to feel a little bit of angst about being in the Cancunian hood without some sense of how to get back to where it was I was supposed to be. And so, as it was turning out, my denying or my being a denier, my attitude of being a denier could have easily been reconciled if I would have listened to the whispering of the little small voice of the smaller lady who was sitting next to me. and just stopped and asked for some help. Let's not be deniers. Another attitude of mind that we have to look out for is the blamer attitude. You know the blamer attitude, the attitude that says that they're getting it wrong, they're doing it wrong. The blamer attitude that is more interested in fixing the blame than fixing the issue. I want to encourage all of us as a community of leaders and as a community of faith to remember that all of us travels with two buckets. And anytime you come across a small spark or smoldering flame, remember that all of us is carrying two buckets. One bucket is filled with water. The other bucket is filled with gasoline. You, as a member of this community, if you've been here for a day or if you've been here for 60 years, you have a bucket. Two. And when you see something happening in the life of this ministry, let me encourage you to take your bucket of water rather than your bucket of gasoline and pour the bucket of water on the smoldering flame of nonsense and ignorance and work on solving the problem rather than talking about it. Will you do that? This is something that we can all do. What can we do? We can be on the lookout if we're going to be a voice of vision and hope. Be on the lookout for the critic. It's the critic attitude. The critic attitude is just a little bit more toxic than the blamer attitude. Because the critic attitude, and it's not you, it might not even be somebody on your row or in your section. But the critic attitude is the attitude that says, people are saying that. You ever had that conversation? People are saying that. We never find out who the people are that are saying that. It just comes out of nowhere. People are saying that. And I get what people might be saying, but I hear Jesus asking a question, and the question goes something like this. Who do you say I am? So let's not trip on what people are saying. Let's focus on what the words that you have to speak life into a thing. What are you talking about? Because here is what I know. If somebody comes down and sits next to you and your conversation is loving, they either have to get into your love flow or they got to get away from you. And so who do you say I am? What can we do? What can we do? We can be a part of an eager coalition. Reverend Wilmetta shared earlier that Dr. Coleman offered to come and, first she said she invited her. You hear Reverend Wilmetta say that Reverend Coleman invited her to the class? And then she said she offered to come and bring her to the class. Did you hear her say that? And then once she gave Rev a little bit of truth and told her that the same God that will drive you in the day will drive you in the night, she still offered to stand on the third floor and look and watch and make sure that she got there safely. Is that right? And so on the first Sunday, we talked about this gradual process of slow erosion, how you can slowly and easily, over the course of a couple decades, go from 3,000 people in the room to 1,200 people in the room. But the same way it works for gradual erosion, it can work for intentional growth. Yeah? And so if, on average, there are about 1,200 of us in the room, and if, on average, just 10% of the 1,200 of us are in the room would take this little blue card. It's a newer card. You'll start to see it around. If just 10% of us or 120 of us who are present will take this little blue card and invite somebody to come to your church. And you can take more than one. So you can invite lots of people, but you can bring at least one. So now if 10% of the 1,200 of us took one of these cards and brought somebody to church, that would be 120 new people, new faces, new hearers in the church on one Sunday. Is that right? Now, let's just say, hypothetically, only 10% of those people stuck and stayed. They found the value. They realized they were at home. So let's just say only 10% of those people stay. So that would be 12 people who stayed from one Sunday of intentional invite and growth. Yeah? Now what if 10% of us did it the following Sunday? And another 12 people of the 120 that came, another 12 people stuck. At the end of the month, hypothetically, that would be 50 people in the course of 1 month who were at home. Yeah? Now what if we extrapolate that out over a year, 48 people times 12 months, that could be a little more than 600 people new at home in the course of 1 year. 600 people is a 33% increase from where we are now. So we could, in the course of 1 year, go from 1,200 to 1,800 in the course of 1 year. Now, where do you find these people at to invite with these cards? It's a nice card. Where do I find these people at? Because a lot of the people I know already go to church. Any coffee drinkers here? Coffee drinkers? Hold your hands up high. It's okay. I'm one of you. Coffee drinkers? When you go to Starbucks, Panera, Dunkin' Donuts, after you pay for your drink and put a little tip in the barista's jar, hand him one of these cards. Say, I want to invite you to my church. How many people go out to eat dinner? That's some out to eaters? Good. After your server is done, dinner is good, you've had a good dinner. After you get your bill and you figure out what your tip amount is, after you've given your server a tip, don't invite them before you've given a tip. We don't want potential members to think that we don't know how to value good service. So after you've given them a tip, you make sure they see the tip and you make sure they see this card. See, I want to invite you to my church. How many of you have kids who are in sports leagues and you spend hours on the sidelines with other adults or grandparents? You could just give them one of these cards and say, I just want to invite you to my church. You don't know where it is? I'll come get you. I'll bring you to my church. The single thing that increases the likelihood that someone will visit your church is an invitation, a personal invitation. How did we build this ministry? Personal invites or people touched by the work of this ministry, and you were on fire, and so you help others get on fire. Now, can I keep it 1,000? If you don't find any value in this ministry, then don't do it. If it's not a blessing to you, don't do it. If you're not better because of what you get from here, then I'm not asking you to do it. But for those of us who are better because of what this ministry has meant to us, then you are the perfect candidate for someone who could reach a card to somebody who needs a prayer, to somebody who's hurting, to somebody who's in pain. You are the perfect person to say, here, let me invite you to my church. And if you can't make it, I'll come and get you. Can I keep it 1,000 again? If it's good enough for the founder. Sometimes you just have to see success leaves clues. if it was good enough for the founder to say, and let's make no mistake about it, Reverend Wilmetta is not the only person that she offered that to. It's practical spirituality. So what can we do? We can actively invite people to be a part of this community of faith. So if you're a part of a book club or bike club or a skate club or a fantasy football club, invite the people that you see there to come to your church, if there's value in it for you. So as we continue to be about the Father's business, I just want to share this one story and we'll go. Because I remember hearing a story about a man who was once stuck waist deep in quicksand. And he was stuck so deep that he became embarrassed. Too embarrassed, in fact, to call for help. And so, though he was not able to loosen himself and to work himself out of it, he wouldn't use his cell phone to call for help. And then these fishermen came by. And as the fishermen came by, the fishermen saw that he was stuck. And so the fishermen jumped in and they decided to help him get free. It took the fishermen another 7 hours to get the young man free. And it took him that long because he was unwilling to loosen his pants. So holding on to what he found important was the thing that was keeping him from being free. And so as a community of faith, we have to remember that that which is sacred is eternal. But that which is dynamic is moving. And we have to be okay with no longer holding on to things that keep us stuck. Particularly not if we do so at the risk of the life of the very thing we say we love. And so I believe with all of my heart and with all of my soul that the favor of God still rests on this ministry. I am completely and totally convinced that the blessing that we came to provide to the world, that assignment still sits with us. I am 100% sold out on the realization that God is not done with us. I hear too many people talking like you. They don't say they got it from you, but they sure do talk like you. And so we cannot afford to let ourselves die because we're unwilling to change. Grow we must. And in order to grow, we have to change. But the good news is God always gives you what you need. And so I see a room full of change agents. People who are willing to stop and pray right where they are. People who are willing to be a voice of vision and hope right where they are. People who are willing to be a part of an eager coalition right where they are. Because we're not done. There is another 61 years ahead of us, and it's not a mediocre or average 61 years. It's 61 years of excellence and greatness and fruitfulness. And so get ready, CUT. We're on the move because God is moving us. God bless you.